Her organs were removed. Her stomach was wiped clean. Marilyn Monroe died on August 5, 1962. She was 36 years old, found face down, unclothed, surrounded by empty prescription bottles. The official verdict was acute barbiturate poisoning. Probable suicide. That single adjective has haunted investigators, journalists, and researchers for over 6 decades. Because when you pull back the curtain on what actually happened inside that autopsy room, what was taken, what was lost, what was never documented, the story stops looking like a tragedy and starts looking like something far more calculated. There are layers to this case. The death scene. The missing evidence. The people with motive. The men who claimed her body even after she was gone. We're going to walk through all of it. And by the end, you'll understand why some researchers believe Marilyn Monroe is one of the most deliberately buried cover-up cases in American history. Not metaphorically buried. Literally. In a crypt. Flanked by men who profited off her existence without her permission. But let's start at the beginning. She wasn't born Marilyn Monroe. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen in 1926, in Los Angeles. Her mother, Gladys, was institutionalized for paranoid schizophrenia when Norma Jean was still a child. Her father was never in the picture. She was shuffled between foster families, group homes, and an orphanage before she hit her teens. She got married at 16, not out of love, but survival. Marriage meant she didn't go back into the system. While other teenagers worried about homework, she was on a wartime assembly line building military equipment. A photographer noticed her. She went platinum blonde, reinvented herself, and signed with 20th Century Fox in 1946. A studio exec picked the name Marilyn Monroe because Norma Jean Mortensen didn't test well with audiences. Imagine being told your own name isn't marketable. She became Hollywood's most luminous creation. The definitive blonde bombshell. But underneath the sequins, severe stage fright. Chronic insomnia. A growing dependence on sedatives to fall asleep, stimulants to wake up, tranquilizers to get through a day on set. She wasn't just performing in films. She was performing Marilyn Monroe every hour of every day, and it was consuming her. She wasn't passive. She launched her own production company, almost unheard of for a woman then. She pushed back against studios, challenged directors, called out abuse. But ambition in a woman that visible comes with a price. Marriages collapsed. Joe DiMaggio. Then Arthur Miller. Miscarriages followed. Depression deepened. By the early 1960s, the tabloids replaced the marquees. Pills, breakdowns, late arrivals, scandal. Yet she remained the most magnetic woman in any room. Including rooms with the most powerful men in the country. May 19, 1962. Madison Square Garden. JFK's birthday celebration. She appeared in a new Delusion gown so fitted it had been stitched onto her body. She moved to the microphone and delivered a rendition of Happy Birthday that stopped the room cold. Jackie Kennedy wasn't there that evening. Draw your own conclusions. The relationship between Marilyn and JFK wasn't a rumor. It was an open secret wrapped in classified silence. And it didn't stop with the president. Robert Kennedy was also reportedly involved. Here's where celebrity gossip turns into something with stakes. Marilyn started telling close contacts she intended to hold a press conference. She kept a red diary she called her insurance policy. If that phrasing doesn't chill you, nothing will. By summer 1962, Kennedy went completely silent on her. No return calls. One day she was at the center of the most powerful circle in America. The next, she was a liability. 3 months after that performance, she was dead. August 4, 1962. Brentwood, Los Angeles. Marilyn was at home in the Spanish-style house she just bought, the first property she owned on her own terms. She never got to settle into it. Her housekeeper Eunice Murray was staying overnight. So was her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. That's already unusual. Murray says Marilyn retired around 8 and closed the door. What happened next depends on who you ask. because Murray's account shifted over the years. That night Marilyn made calls. She spoke with Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law. He said she sounded heavily sedated. She also called her publicist and sounded more alert. Lawford got concerned, tried to check on her, was reportedly told to stay away. Then, silence. Around 3 in the morning, Murray claimed she saw light under Marilyn's door and couldn't rouse her. She didn't call emergency services. She called Dr. Greenson. He arrived, entered through a window, found Marilyn face down, unclothed, holding the phone. He called Dr. Hyman Engelberg. The two waited close to an hour before notifying police. Law enforcement arrived at 4:30 a.m. The scene didn't match the story. Empty pill bottles were present. A water glass wasn't. No suicide note. The room looked freshly tidied. Bed linens undisturbed. Some accounts suggest her body had been repositioned and possibly cleaned before officers entered. Murray later told the BBC she had been instructed to stay quiet. Read that again. The housekeeper was told to stay quiet. That is not grief. That is management. Marilyn was declared dead of acute barbiturate poisoning. Probable suicide. The autopsy was done by Dr. Thomas Noguchi, later known as the coroner to the stars. Noguchi said in later years the findings left him with doubts. Toxicology showed massive concentrations of nembutyl in her bloodstream, significant chloral hydrate in her liver, and her stomach was entirely empty. No residue. No partially dissolved capsules. Nothing. That detail changes everything. If someone consumes lethal pills orally, the digestive system doesn't process them instantly. There should be physical evidence in the stomach. There was none. The leading alternative theory is that the drugs were introduced rectally, through an enema or suppository. That bypasses the stomach, absorbs directly into the bloodstream faster, and leaves no gastric trace. Whether Marilyn did that to herself or it was done to her is the question no one has answered. And when investigators pushed for further tissue testing, they hit a wall. Her stomach was gone. Her intestines were gone. Multiple organs that should have been preserved under standard protocol weren't retained. The explanation was that the tissues had deteriorated. She'd been dead less than 12 hours. Organ deterioration that renders tissue untestable in under 12 hours isn't medical reality. It's an excuse. The samples that were collected were later reported as lost. Not misfiled. Lost. Then there are statements from former mortuary personnel and independent journalists alleging Marilyn's body was diverted before it reached the coroner's facility. That it arrived late. That there were signs of physical trauma never entered into any record. That claim is unconfirmed and lacks conclusive physical evidence. But the gap between what the autopsy documented and what should have been documented is real. And when that gap exists, people reach for the darkest explanation. The possibility that Marilyn Monroe was violated after her death, by someone with access in those unaccounted hours, has been raised by multiple sources across decades. As someone who understands chain of custody, the absence of one here isn't an accident. It's a decision. Step back and look at the conspiracy threads. The Kennedy thread, affairs with the President and Attorney General. A red diary with conversations about government operations. Bobby Kennedy was reportedly inside her home that day. Some say he left before doctors arrived. Others say he took the diary. The diary has never been recovered. The organized crime thread. Sam Giancana had connections to both Marilyn and the Kennedy circle. The question isn't just whether she knew too much. It's whether she was leverage in a larger power arrangement between government and organized crime, and whether eliminating her solved problems for multiple parties. The mob didn't leave loose ends. The federal agency thread. The FBI had an active file on Marilyn Monroe. The CIA reportedly assessed her as a national security concern. A movie actress. A national security concern. What was said in private conversations that made intelligence communities monitor her? She was emotionally volatile, connected to senior officials, and reportedly sympathetic to leftist figures during the Cold War. To certain agencies, that was dangerous. And the inner circle, Greenson, Engelberg, and Murray had unrestricted access. They had means to administer something without her knowledge. They had opportunity to alter the scene before police. And they all changed their stories in later years. Whether out of loyalty, fear, or involvement, none were ever seriously investigated. The funeral tells its own story. Joe DiMaggio took control and locked out Hollywood. 30 guests. No Kennedy associates. No studio execs. She was buried in her favorite green Pucci dress, hairstyled as she wore it in life, in a bronze casket lined with champagne satin. DiMaggio had fresh roses delivered to her crypt 3 times a week for 2 decades. He never remarried. He said he'd go to his grave knowing he did everything to protect her. By the end, he was the only one who tried. And then the men who found ways to be near her after she was gone. Richard Poncher bought the crypt above Marilyn's in the 1950s. On his deathbed, he told his wife to bury him face down over her. She did. Years later she tried to auction the plot on eBay. Bidding hit $4.6 million before it collapsed. Hugh Hefner bought the crypt beside Marilyn's in the 1990s. He never met her. He made a fortune publishing her nude photos without consent for that use. He built an empire on her image while she lived and arranged to spend eternity beside her after she died. She had no say in either. Marilyn Monroe wasn't destroyed by weakness. She was worn down by a system that extracted everything of value and gave no protection back. The drugs were prescribed by doctors who were supposed to treat her. Men who called themselves partners leveraged her fame. The government that surveilled her saw her as a risk. When she was gone, evidence that might have told the real story was removed or lost. Her organs disappeared from an autopsy table. Her diary disappeared from her home. Her body may have spent hours unaccounted for. What remains is a case file full of improbable words that create the illusion of documentation while ensuring nothing is ever proven. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, as a thinker, as a woman with a voice. She fought for that her entire career. In the end, the people closest to her made sure she couldn't speak. If this makes you want answers, drop your thoughts. Do you believe the official verdict? Do you think someone in that inner circle knew what happened and chose silence? There's more ground to cover on the doctors, the agencies, the men who shaped her story and buried it. One woman. And somehow, she still threatened an entire government just by existing. Think about that. See you next time.